designed to use it. For example, one submarine, Trident submarine, has the nuclear capability to put 366 missiles down on a target, and those missiles would range from 100 kiloton to 400 kiloton, or we'll say 20 times greater than that used on Hiroshima. One submarine, so one submarine has the firepower capability, one American submarine, of destroying every major city in the Soviet Union, plus every key military base of a population, say, of over 200,000 in the major cities. One submarine, there's something like a projected plan of 60-odd Trident submarines on the blueprints. So one can do the job, two is 200%, but we're going to have 60. That the firepower available between the Soviet Union and America is 16 times greater than what is needed. It just, not, to me, it defies all reason. I can't comprehend why you need that kind of destructive power. And now the American government, President Reagan, because of this arms race that he's into, is advocating the acquisition of 17,000 more warheads. The President of the United States was recently elected by 26% of the population, okay? He spent $40 million in his campaign. $40 million. Now, his salary is about $200,000 a year, so you work that out. His Secretary of State, Haig, came from United Technology. They spent last year in military spending $3 billion. His replacement, who's Schultz, came from Burkle. They were $2 billion into defense spending. Weinberger was from Burkle, $2 billion in defense spending. Okay, let's just look at the American system of the selection of senators and members of the House of Representatives. They get not the money from the people anymore. It comes from the defense contractor. The B-1 is good for California, said Governor Brown and Senator Cranston, because they get incredible contributions. And this is documented in affidavits, and there's no way it can be stopped. I have actually seen the missiles on the airplanes or on their launchers ready to go. And so we are today but a hairbreadth away from destruction. Well, I think it'll start by a miscalculation or an accident. Since November of 1980, there have been 151 false computer reports. In several cases, we've been only minutes away from a war.
According to the Pentagon, the false alarm started with what it called a technical problem in a computer at NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command, in Colorado Springs in the early hours of Tuesday morning. This brought up visual displays at the Strategic Air Command in Omaha and at the Military Command Center at the Pentagon, indicating Soviet missile launches from land and sea against the United States. Warplanes at the Strategic Air Command, B-52 bombers, and F-111s like these were manned immediately, and their engines were started. One command and control aircraft of the type shown here actually took off from its base in Hawaii. But defense officials say that even as the planes were starting up, it was clear there was no attack.
We thought from the beginning that it was false. We knew in quick order that it was a computer malfunction, not an actual attack underway.
Only 7 months ago, NORAD went on a similar alert when simulated attack data were accidentally fed into the computers. An immediate investigation has been ordered to find out what happened this time.
It came to pass during the Watergate incident that the president was under such enormous pressure, and reports from people that I read the biography on Kissinger, which by William Morris, which pretty well went into great detail, because this fellow was there and observed all of this, and that Mr. Nixon was so unbalanced that he wasn't capable of making any decisions, because each night he was pretty well blown out, either by alcohol or happy tranquilizers to reduce the pressure so he could face another day the next day. And there was a confrontation, for example, I think the best one would be in October of '73. This was the Yom Kippur War, and the Israelis were about to destroy the Egyptian army, and specifically they were destroying the Third Corps of that army. And Brezhnev sent his ambassador in to see the president. He wasn't able to see him, but he delivered a message to Kissinger, and it said, "I am employing 7 airborne divisions, my fleet, and I put my nuclear forces on total alert, and I'm prepared to have a shootout unless you tell the Israelis to leave the Egyptians alone, pull back, and observe the ceasefire." Kissinger went to the president, tried to explain this to him, and Haig was there, as was other witnesses to this incident, and the president was so non-compos mentis and so not with it, he was out of it, and he said, "Henry, you handle it." Now this fellow from Fürth, Germany, went back to his job, where he was the advisor to the president on defense affairs, and alerted the United States military, put the nuclear forces on total alert, moved a naval force into the Middle East where this action was occurring, and alerted an airborne division, American Airborne Division, to move into the area of contest. Now, these acts are all acts that can only be done by the President of the United States, and these are spelled out in the Constitution. So it's quite possible that this could happen again.
Does any of you have any idea of the firepower of one of these submarines? I mean, we say that they carry 200 warheads or 160 warheads or whatever it is. The only way that I can describe that to you is if you take all of the explosives that were detonated in the entirety of World War II by both sides, from 1939 to 1945, a single Poseidon submarine carries twice that firepower.
Great number of prominent people in America and in Hollywood, and actors and so on, are becoming very outspoken and very vocal to educate the people of this great threat. And Paul Newman is one of them, and one of the leaders of that. And he's the most articulate, stalwart, excellent speaker who's delivering a powerful message around the world.
We have in this country what is called a triad deterrent system. We have 50% of our strategic arsenal. That's missiles that can hit the Soviet Union, and submarines. We have 25% that is based on land and 25% that is delivered by airplanes. If you want to get into a discussion of the use of these weapons, it would be fair to say, I will take all of our land-based missiles, put them in Red Square and let them blow them up, okay? I'll take all of our air-based, our weapons that are delivered by airplanes, I'll throw those into Red Square and let them get blown up. Because the United States, 365 days out of the year, maintains 55 to 60% of its submarine force off the coast of the Soviet Union. Can strike at any minute, 365 days a year. That's 3,000 warheads. We don't have that many targets. Why do we need any more than that? We have enough to get the job done. Does the military-industrial complex make an effort to create a climate of terror in this country in order to get appropriation?
In other words,
in order to get popular approval.
So if we can get the people to believe the Russians are coming, we're going to build more...
Then you can get anything you want.
You build more planes, more people go to work, and the stockholders are happy.
Well, not more people go to work. You got to understand, for every $1 billion that you spend in defense, you create the least possible number of jobs that the government can create.
Well, last year, $500 billion around the world was spent on defense. 1/2 of all engineers and all scientists in the world are busy making weapons. That's about 200,000 very bright PhD-type people that are making weapons to destroy one another. The reason for it, it's big business, Mike. The this confrontation that is occurring, and it's getting closer and closer as each day passes, Mike, that the Soviet Union and America are coming closer and closer to a nuclear war, be it caused by a miscalculation on the part of the leaders, be it caused by one of the hundreds of accidents that have occurred. It's going to happen unless the ingrained habits and assumptions of man changes. Now, and that what can cause that is, with our leaders, is the people causing that change. But in the meantime, how Australia becomes threatened by this is we offer our territory to house bases which serve as a threat to the Soviet Union, meaning these bases control satellites that provide intelligence to the leaders of the American effort, to telling them where the Soviet submarines and ships are and so on. They provide command to the nuclear submarines that have ability to destroy the Soviet Union, and they also provide command and control to the U.S. fleet and to the B-52s that will be located and overfly this country now. So what has to be done, the Soviets realizing this situation, their first thing they would do is to destroy these bases, these facilities. They would try and blind America by knocking out, for example, Pine Gap. They would try to cut off the nuclear submarine arm by knocking out Northwest Cape. They would try to destroy the America's nuclear retaliatory effort by destroying the ships that are in our ports. So these have all come about by a treaty agreement which says to Australia, look, provide us with these facilities and we will back you up. So this treaty agreement is placing us right in the frying pan. Now, if we look historically back on treaties, if we say, well, we've always been an appendage of a superpower, if we go back from the beginning of the British Empire when we sent our troops to the Boer War to be court-martialed and shot, we involved in Gallipoli, World War I, World War II, Malaya, Korea, Vietnam, all these Australians, soldiers going, fighting for someone else, for Big Brother, for their senior partner in the treaty arrangement, which promises us that if we get into trouble, the treaty partner will come and support us. Well, today, the trouble is going to happen in 8 minutes. So it's insane that this country have a partnership because it's going to be destroyed by nuclear weapons. If the nuclear superpowers want to shoot out, let them have it in their own backyard. And we're going to get a lot of contamination, a lot of radiation anyway, but let them shoot it out. And if Australia led the way as one of the first countries to become a non-nuclear zone, I think the rest of the small countries in the world who have been intimidated by the big bullies will follow. Everything I have read regarding nuclear war by scientists from Einstein down say there will not be a planet left. People are strange animals, and they can take so much abuse and then they rebel. And I think that we're seeing this around the world today. We're seeing in Europe where literally thousands upon thousands of people are marching for peace. In England, was it 60,000 odd people have camped, ladies by the way, have camped around a future missile base. And right at this moment there's a peace march going from Sweden across Russia. But it's about time that the government legislated against something that's going to destroy this planet. And I think the people are going to cause that. And our very purpose here is simply to educate people so they can realize that the great threat they live under and demand of their politicians, not ask of their politicians, but demand of them for some other alternative other than this mad race to war, this business we talked about before of us versus them. We've got to make peace because the weapons of war today are so destructive. It's no longer a couple guys standing on a hill with swords, swinging them at each other and going home for dinner and having a glass of wine and talking about the great battle. Today, it's the destruction of everything. So the people have to become aware and galvanized and forge together to march for peace and do something in the interest of peace. that people got turned off on Vietnam, both here in Australia and in America, because it was on the tube every night. It was visual. You could feel it or smell it. And what you're saying is the whole nuclear thing is one of those intangible things. And the government has dressed it all in gobbledygook, in megatons, megadeaths, in such language that the average person, it doesn't mean anything. Both sides, both the Soviets and the Americans, are locked in this defense arms race, and they are not free men. They're working for their agency, so they've got the generals and the defense contractors, both in the Soviet Union and in America, breathing hard on them, saying, you know, for example, Khrushchev, he started a new era. He tried to reduce the arms race in the Soviet Union. It cost him his job. That's one of the primary reasons that he was sacked. So it's going to have to start with one, that these two leaders getting together, and they can be brought together by the people demanding it. Some of the great thinkers have said that we could easily start with, say, a 10% cut. All nuclear weapons cut 10%, then another 10%, and finally getting down to 10%, which is still probably 2 or 3 times the firepower needed to destroy one another for openers. And I think you're right. I think the freeze is the answer, and I think in Australia's case, what needs to be very seriously looked at is all of the treaty agreements that brings Australia into this nuclear arena, and why our cities, our ports, our airfields, and so on are under nuclear threat.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
But what concerns me is I pretty well lived my life, but I have a young son, and I see in my son the future of mankind. And I want him to be a great example for the interest of peace and nonviolence and so on. And, but if we keep going the way we're going, he is not going to have a future. So what we need to do is not just take our word for the seriousness or the awesomeness of this threat, but I think all people watching this tube right at this moment should educate themselves, find out if what we're saying is correct, and if it is, then inform their representatives in the federal parliament of their concern.
The threat of nuclear annihilation is real. It's not imaginary, it's real. And it's the most urgent problem we have. Everything else is of secondary significance. As you've seen in this program, the arms merchants, the manufacturers, are just blindly churning out more warheads, more missiles, more potential for human suffering. The one bomb dropped on Hiroshima blew away 100,000 people in just a few seconds. In a full nuclear exchange, the equivalent of 1 million Hiroshima bombs would go off all over the world. 1 million. There won't be much left. But still, not everyone would be killed by the blast and the firestorm and the radiation. There would be other agonies. The death of family and friends and neighbors. Millions of burned and blinded and injured. Disease and plague and cancer and stillbirths. If it happens, most of what you're doing with your life will be meaningless. Nuclear war would be sheer horror. So you see, there's no point in waiting, in just letting it happen. And you can change things. Every person, every single one of us must join together, must tell those in power what we want them to do. It can be done. It's our life. It's our world. It's up to us.